Hello. Oh, wow. Okay. Hey, everybody. So this is it's not an official meeting, right? So I don't need to take a quorum or anything. But we'll get started at 6:30. So this is one of hopefully the only one we have to do. We got some good news in recently to help avoid some of these headaches. But we'll have this recorded for anybody who wants to see it and has questions going forward. But this is kind of an informal town hall to talk about the sewer bills this year. I think we have on the dais, just to let everybody know, I'm going to stick up here, but I want you guys to hear mostly from the professionals who actually handled this. We have the CFO, Ken Blum. We have the administrator, Andrew Casillas. We have Joe DeMarco, who's our counsel. We have Mike Baker, who's special counsel. And we have Kevin Boyer, who's our borough engineer, right? So you'll get all perspectives of it from their view, not my political view or my mayor spin. You'll hear directly from them. So I think for those of you who haven't heard the spiel before, I think it's important to kind of talk about where we're at. For a lot of you, this will be review, but I will now hand it over to Andrew. Just so we will take questions also from everybody, right? Anybody who wants to. I think we'll do, what are we doing? How long?
3 to 5 minutes.
3 to 5 minutes, just to be respectful of everybody's time.
Go back around.
But yeah, if you want to go back around the second time, this is for you guys to ask questions if you have them. And hopefully, you should also hit on yeah, just go ahead, Andrew. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to hit on the issue that got us here, and then I'll get us to the point where a lawsuit was filed. And I'm going to pass it off to the attorneys and the engineer to kind of talk more about that. The main issue here is there is a connection. So the Borough of Roselle Park has a separated stormwater and sanitary sewer system. So the best way to think about it is the water that runs in the street into the storm drains is separated from the water that goes through the pipes in your house and out to the street, into the main. The City of Elizabeth has a combined sewer system where all the water goes into one and all that water is treated as one. Unfortunately, the Borough of Roselle Park and the City of Elizabeth have a connection point at the intersection of Galloping Hill Road and East Grand Avenue. This has been something that's known overtly to both municipalities for decades. There have been conversations that have gone hot and cold, on and off for a very long time. I couldn't quote you how many years, but at least 20 years. And speaking with some former council people, it may be much more than that. And some of the discussions on some level have always been, we need to address this. Unfortunately, for the current predicament we're in, over the last 20 years, both the EPA and the DEP have begun to crack down on CSOs. So what a CSO is, it's a combined sewer outflow. It's the result of water outflowing from a combined sewer system of which the City of Elizabeth has. The problem is the Borough of Roselle Park contributes to that problem, right? It contributes to that regulatory issue that the DEP and the EPA are trying to mitigate with entities like the city, with municipalities like the City of Elizabeth. So because of these enforcement actions that have been happening to the City of Elizabeth, there have been advanced discussions over the last, 10 to 20 years about how this is going to be addressed. There have been discussions over a period of time about payments from the Borough of Roselle Park to the City of Elizabeth, a complete separation project, capital improvement projects, and contributions from the Borough of Roselle Park to the City of Elizabeth. So there have been discussions and negotiations over a long period of time to try to get to an amicable break point on the issue, an amicable separation of ways or an amicable understanding of how this was going to be treated because of these enforcement actions that are being made onto the City of Elizabeth by the DEP and the EPA. There was never a point where the borough thought there was a reasonable settlement inbound on that, right? There was never a point where the terms offered by Elizabeth in terms of a payment or a separation project or a quarterly utility type of payment from the borough to Elizabeth was feasible. There was never an acceptable time where we came to an agreement on it. So in earnest, the city of Elizabeth last year in 2023 filed a lawsuit.
So just a bit, you skipped one, I think, important
Sure.
thing that's going to come up later. So they, in between all of this, they also put in a flow meter between Roselle Park and the city of Elizabeth. Well, it was about, 2013?
Right, 2013, 2014.
2013, 2014, they actually started to monitor the inflows from Roselle Park into Elizabeth to try and quantify what they think we were contributing to this. I think that's an important detail that'll come
Right,
up later.
right. So there was a meter put in 2013, 2014, to the mayor's point, and the idea of that was to meter the flows through that connection point to see what a rate payment, if we were going to do that in perpetuity to the city of Elizabeth, would look like for Roselle Park on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis. The problem and the dispute that Roselle Park always, was the sticking point was the amount that we would be paying to Elizabeth in perpetuity for the treatment of this stormwater. And then ultimately, on a secondary issue, in addition to the rate, the city of Elizabeth wanted to have Roselle Park pay for capital improvements in the city of Elizabeth that would be really of no benefit to Roselle Park, for a system we didn't own and we would never own. Something else, before we get to the point where we're talking about the actual lawsuit that was filed in May, the other idea that was always floated and obviously is in play now is a complete separation. The reason why Roselle Park didn't seize immediately on a complete separation is because of the costs involved with it. A complete separation is when I say a multi-million-dollar project, it's, at least a $10 million project. You're talking about running miles of pipeline, interstate highways and rights of way. It's not a decision to be made lightly, and, Elizabeth saying to the borough of Roselle Park, you should just do this, is not something that we were really immediately welcoming to. And when I say we, I don't mean just the people sitting up here or the people who sit up here 2 times a month. I mean the borough of Roselle Park over the course of over a decade was not really, okay with that in the immediate, in addition to not being okay with the rates proposed by Elizabeth to just pay them to use the system like a user would use their sewer system. So all of that, there was no agreement made. Roselle Park, we were trying to feel out how we were going to deal with it, talking about how we would finance the project, talking about how we wouldn't immediately impact the taxpayer by bonding the money, going to the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank for low-interest loans, forgivable loans through FEMA, things like that. It was pretty much at that point that Elizabeth and Roselle Park were not talking, and Elizabeth then filed a lawsuit against Roselle Park, which said, you have been a freeloader on our system for 100 years plus. You are now causing us issues from a compliance perspective with DEP. They have permitting themselves that they have to comply with DEP and the EPA. And we are a contributing factor to the fines and costs associated with their operation of their system. I'll let Mike take over in a second about the logistics of the lawsuit. Our going in position to this was, like a lot of you feel, I believe, is that
Go pound salt.
we haven't been freeloading on your system. These were decisions made over 100 years ago through no negative action or adverse action of the people involved right now. The residents, past and present, made no decisions about this. This is just the virtue of the geography of the area, where you have a small borough connected to a large system, and it is what it is. We don't owe you anything for past usage. Maybe we can come to an agreement on future usage, and we can talk about a disconnection. And I think that's where I want to leave it before I let Mike take over.
Yeah, I would say, and just to end cap it with some positive news, right? So we made the announcement today. So there's one piece, there's 2 pieces directly affecting why your guys' bill was so high this year, right? One is the new rates that we have to pay, right, ongoing until we're disconnected, which is a smaller piece of that. The larger piece is they deemed, we settled on a $4 million agreement to pay them in the arrears. They initially asked for $40 million, I think it was.
23, Mayor.
23, thank you. 23 mayors going way back. So that is the big pain point that you guys are feeling. We did get emergency grant or state aid today to the tune of $3 million, which in large part should cover most of that, and that will be reflected in your bill. The hope is to get that reflected this year. There's obviously, look, there's legalities to all of this to make sure that we can do that this year, to make sure that we can get it done in time. But you will feel that relief very soon based on the grant that we just got, which is very good news. Something positive from a very, very negative situation. So, Mike, now take us into the lawsuit piece.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So, in the lawsuit, it was filed in what's called the equity courts, common equity courts. It's different than what you see on TV or what you see with civil courts with a jury. There's no jury, there's a judge. And
It's a little closer.
okay, there's no jury, there's a judge in equity. And the charge to the judge is to do what's fair and equitable between the parties. So you have a situation, as Andrew pointed out, where the allegation is we're freeloading and City of Elizabeth residents are paying to treat the runoff from Roselle Park. City of Elizabeth is receiving fines, is being ordered to leave to cut out additional water that's flowing into their system. And they're claiming damages and costs that they're incurring as a result of what Roselle Park is doing. Through the course of litigation, you have what are called case management conferences. We sit down with the judge and we talk about the case and where the case is going. And through that process, the attorneys and the judge, you get a feeling of where the court is going to go. Pretty early on, it was clear that the judge thought this was a case that should be settled, that the judge thought that this is a case where Roselle Park had to get out of the Elizabeth system, where Roselle Park had to pay going forward for Elizabeth treating our stormwater. And the big question was, how much would we have to pay for the decades of treatment that Elizabeth was doing, paying for on our water. Fortunately, there's only a 10-year statute of limitations, so we can only go back 10 years, and coincidentally, the metering system was put in about 10 years before the lawsuit was filed. As the mayor pointed out, we started at zero. We didn't want to disconnect. We didn't want to pay anything. They had a $23 million figure, and they wanted us to disconnect as quickly as possible. When you're in court, you don't know where the decision is going to come down in the end after you have a trial. Could we have done it better? Sure. Could we have done worse? Sure. So we ended up somewhere in the middle where I think
I wouldn't say somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Way below
Yeah.
the middle point.
Right.
You know, we ended up at $4 million. They were at $23 million. We started at zero. We did way better than the middle. And through the course of this, the different routes were assessed by your engineer, Kevin, will go into that. Elizabeth wanted the borough to use the most expensive route that would have cost probably $40 million. We wanted to use the least expensive route, but Elizabeth was not going to go for that and would have objected. And we ended up with a route somewhere in the middle that is not what Elizabeth wanted, not exactly what we wanted, but it's probably where the judge would have come down if we had had a trial. So the big issue in the settlement was coming up with what is that back payment going to be. When you're in municipal government, one of the things that you need to do each year is budget, just like we all do in our home budgets. And what we don't like is uncertainty. And the uncertainty of whether the court would come back and say $5 million, $10 million, $15 million is one of the things that forces you into, not forces you, drives you to finding a settlement, because the CFO needs certainty, needs to know how to budget. The council, the mayor needs certainty, need to know how to budget. They need to know how to set rates, how to do financing going forward. So in the end, we got, I think, on the settlement at $4 million for back payment, a better deal than we would have gotten with the judge, because we got to pay it over 11 years. I don't think the court would have ever allowed us to pay it over that length of time. So we've got a in-between route, not the most expensive, not the cheapest, but the one the judge was likely going to rule on. We got a much better monetary settlement over a much longer period of time than I think we would have gotten with the judge. And we're paying in what the court would have thought is fair and equitable. We're paying regular sewage rates going forward until we're disconnected, just like everybody else whose water or sewage goes into their system and they have to pay.
Yep.
Fair, Mayor?
Fair. And there's just two things I want to highlight, and then I want to have you talk about something else to front run, I'm sure, some of the discussion tonight. So I really want to make this abundantly clear. When they filed the lawsuit, going to court means one guy. It means the judge. This isn't, Law and Order where the people of Roselle Park could go out and plead their case. It would be up to the judge and his whim to decide. Roselle Park says they owe nothing. Elizabeth says they owe $23 million. The reason why you settle is because, in all likelihood, what do judges do? They split the baby. There's a very realistic scenario where we went to court, i.e. this one judge, and he said, Roselle Park owes $12 million, right? And that's what you're hedging against by settling, right? And once again, I want to repeat what we got today, or this through the state, right? So that $3 million we got is going to cover much of that and we have some other ideas to cover the final $1 million, right? We have 11 years to pay it, so we have time to figure out that last $1 million piece. I also want you to talk, Mike, so a lot of folks here obviously riled up about the situation, did their own work. I know we provided you with a lot of those documents, right? I know that we could probably go document by document, and I think that's not a great use of anybody's time. But in summary, a lot of those documents are newspaper clippings. None of those in your review are because of when it was done and based on the content of it. First off, your read on that. And second off, if there was a silver bullet, which there was not, the silver bullet we would have needed was a contract signed between the Borough of Roselle Park and the City of Elizabeth, and there was none, right?
Correct. There is no agreement that anyone has found. I know that the town has.
Do you have come on up. No, let's do this, John. You have you have an agreement?
I have the lawsuit from 1915 with riparian rights stating that the Borough of Roselle Park put a sewer into a culvert. 1915.
Mike's behind you.
All right. Behind me. Can't sit today. All right. So here's the bill. Union County versus the City of Elizabeth. All right. I know I'm not a lawyer, but here's what it states. That, to your order, the duly elected and constituted board of chosen freeholders of the County of Union have built and maintained a culvert across the road known as Galloping Hill Road at the point where said road is crossed by Grant Avenue to said Galloping Hill Road, at said point being the boundary line between the City of Elizabeth and Borough of Roselle Park. That the Board of Children Freeholders of the County of Union over 60 years ago erected and constructed a culvert at said point and have maintained said culvert, rebuilding, repairing, and maintaining the same to the present time as duty bound that they are obliged to do at the expense of the County of Union. That said culvert, so built and maintained by your order, is over an old runway, brook, and watercourse which has been in existence for upwards of 60 years and has your order informed and believes from the time immemorial through which the water flows from a watershed and springs in the Borough of Roselle Park. Roselle Park in 1914 built a storm sewer. Where is it? I have I don't have it here. Built a storm sewer over this creek.
Yeah.
Here's a deposition from Noah Woodruff. I'm sure he's probably related to Mr. Woodruff, who's sitting somewhere in the audience tonight. All right, I will take my time.
Yeah, but John, while you're looking up, right? So
Sure.
Here's some bits that we know, right? So it's from 1914. I believe you looked at a lot of this documentation, Mike. So I think there's two issues with that, right? One is the fact that it happened in 1914.
It happened in 1924.
1924,
This is the
regardless
lawsuit
if it's
from
before 1945, when the state of New Jersey updated its constitution, it's a problem, right?
State court.
So go ahead.
State transfer
Go ahead,
court.
go ahead, Kevin, please. Or Mike.
So the lawsuit in 1915 involved overland drainage of water, and it
Okay.
involved Elizabeth putting up a concrete dam to
That's
block
correct.
it. It did not involve, does not pertain to a underground sewer line
Actually, it does.
connection.
1914, Roselle Park built their sewer.
They built a culvert, you just said.
Culvert, storm sewer.
Culvert is an open
Roselle Park
drainage.
built a storm sewer in 1914 along Grand Avenue from Hemlock Street to Galloping Hill Road. I have the bids, and I have who it was awarded to, out of an engineering journal.
So Mike, regardless, I want to talk about, there's two factors that are at play here, regardless of the technicality of it was one specific culvert or a lawsuit broadly about stormwater, right? So I'll talk
Apparently,
to.
it's our stormwater that's going
Thanks,
to
John.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, let me.
It is, right? Okay. My time.
What I'm trying. There's.
You asked me to come up here.
Okay, got it. Yeah, settle in. So I want to talk about 1923, right?
Okay.
So Joe and Mike, can we talk about if something was settled in 1923, can that not be relitigated today in 2024, and does that even hold up?
So you have a lot of other factors that have come into play since then. Stormwater regs, treatment of sewage is totally different. Treatment of sewage was not, right? Sewage capacity.
Yeah, Chris, we'll let you go, but this is John's up right now. Thank you.
The point I'm trying to make is the world has changed and the regulations regarding stormwater have changed, right? So what probably may, even assuming that all that is correct, was a free system is now a paid system for Elizabeth. So a judge would probably say, that may have been true if it was, and I'm not saying it is, and there was no cost associated with it, it doesn't mean that now you don't pay for it, but Elizabeth pays. It's not, well, so.
We'll let you come up, Chris.
So
We'll let you come up.
the point is, that's not hearsay, first of all. My point is that the fee system on stormwater and sewage has drastically changed from the early 1900s to 2024. So an equitable judge would sit there and say, water that is starting in Roselle Park is now going and being paid by residents of Elizabeth. And that is not fair, is the argument that Elizabeth makes.
Okay, so it's not fair for Elizabeth. We have a lawsuit that said that our culvert, here, right here, T. Foster Jones built a sewer from Hemlock to,
Correct.
okay, to
So-
Galloping Hill Road. It flowed out into a creek in Elmora. Lawsuit. Let's go right back to it. Dig the creek right back in Elizabeth, open a sewer right after Galloping Hill Road, and put it right back on the ground. Let it flow.
And the state of New Jersey is going to tell you can't do that.
Why not?
Because the state of New Jersey is going to say they
Back to
just
an old creek bed.
updated their stormwater regulations,
Okay.
and they're not going to allow you to do that.
Mike, I believe you have a similar
My question for-
Just real quick, Mike, I believe you have a similar situation that you dealt with Rutgers University, I think you were talking about?
Another town I represent, Rutgers had refused to pay connection fees for decades. For my town, we sued them and just collected fees, got a judgment from the court for $2,050,000 for 10 years of connection fees.
Okay.
So
So during the lawsuit, that's not our issue, but during the lawsuit, were you provided with the proceedings of the Board of Public Works, City of Elizabeth?
No.
No, you weren't. So you didn't see anything that the city engineer talked about, city clerk,
These
their
doc-
Public Works Board?
these
These documents, 1923.
I will tell you, those documents don't have a bearing on the sewer system. They relate to a culvert and riparian rights, which are overland
They
drainage.
relate very much to a sewer system. There was a communication from the Elmora Realty Company suggesting the joint construction by the city and Elmora Realty Company for a 42-inch sewer in Grant Avenue from Galloping Hill Road to William Street in Elizabeth. Grant Avenue in Elizabeth is now Park Avenue, which goes into our Grant Avenue.
No one is contesting
They requested
this-
that. Hold
No,
on, let me finish.
Sure.
The Elmora Realty Company received it. Tom Collins, city engineer. Tom Collins, city engineer. Honorable Board of Public Works, gentlemen, with further reference to the petition of the Amora Realty Company concerning construction of a storm sewer in Grand Avenue from the present terminus near Summit Road, Galloping Hill to Galloping Hill Road. The property owned by the Amora Realty Company located on both sides of Grand Avenue, now Park Avenue, is traversed by an open ditch which carries surface water arising and coming from the property located in the borough of Roselle Park on the westerly side of Galloping Hill Road. In order to develop this property, it will be necessary to eliminate the open ditch which crosses Grand Avenue at two places and substitute a storm sewer of 42 inches in diameter. If you now look at the Elizabeth sewer maps that they have on their website, there's a 42-inch concrete sewer that our sewer dumps into. They removed the ditch and put the sewer and connected our sewer to theirs. We did not do any connections to them. They caused this problem. Furthermore, this claims that it's a storm sewer in 1924. At some point between 1924 and now, they must have turned it into a combined sewer. Not our doing, it's their doing. Why are we paying any money to them? $0 should be spent to them. They stated right here that they closed in their open sewer to a 42-inch culvert, connecting our sewer to theirs. Now, if you guys, did you get this during the litigation? Because maybe you should go back to the city of Elizabeth and tell them that their city engineer told the residents and the council of Elizabeth that this is what should be done to develop Elmora.
Yeah, so hold on, there's going to be order here, right? If you want to come up and speak, you can come up and speak. Johnny, do you have anything else you want to say?
Sure. I have the docket from the city of Elizabeth, the contractor that did the work, the bill number, the costs, everything that they put into it. Everything's in the Port of Public Works books. Have all of it. I have the ordinance they passed for a 42-inch sewer from Grand Avenue to City Line to Halsted Road. It's all in there. I went and did the research at the Elizabeth Public Library. All there. All for you. This all will be posted online on Facebook if anybody wants anything. It's all there. Elizabeth connected their sewer to ours and pretty much sandbagged us by turning it into a combined sewer and now charging us.
So, I mean, look, once again, I'm gonna state this, and I'm gonna state this as clearly as possible, right? The NJDEP was founded in 1970, right? All of these things would have come up and would have been brought to a judge had we had gone to court. Yes, Johnny?
1978, he was already aware of this.
All of these things would have come up and would have come up during discovery and would have come into play with a judge's decision. Once again, a judge could and would rule, this is the risk, that we have done harm and cost the city of Elizabeth money and made us pay damages, period, right? So the reason why you settle is because in the event where a judge found us liable, we could have paid more, right? That is the risk of going to court. Go ahead, George. Yep.
So basically, yes, if we went in front of a judge, we would settle.
No, hold on. If we went, we
In
did
fact,
settle.
when-
If
okay.
we went to a judge, it would have been, the ruling would have been in the judge's hands.
Correct. When you went in front of the judge, did you have any of this information at hand?
We knew. I didn't have those documents.
Did you at least have the articles?
You asked the question, you're going to
Okay,
let me
go ahead.
answer. We knew that a connection was made. We knew it was a 42-inch connection. We knew where it was made. So that we're not denying that was done. What we're saying is there was never an agreement at the time that it would be.
Oh, my.
Johnny, you want to come back up at the end, you can. No, I'm trying to have some order here. So, excuse me, Mr. Dirkle, you're allowed to yell up here, though. Got it. Thank you. Go ahead. George, please.
Did you know who made the connection? Was it Roselle Park or was it Elizabeth? When you went in front of the
Roselle
judge.
Park brought the connection to its border, and City of Elizabeth brought it to the Roselle Park.
So we
connection.
had our connection there first.
I don't remember the exact timing, but I think we had our
But
connection there
going back
first.
to my question, did you have at least the newspaper articles as evidence when you went in front of the judge?
Newspaper articles are not evidence.
Okay, well, what he has are official documents. Did you have those then?
I did not.
Okay, so you basically went in front of a judge and settled the case without having all of the information at hand, which is what you're saying.
No, that's what you're saying.
All right, so
Had
did
the-
you have all of the information at hand when you went in front of the judge?
Had the information at hand that we needed for a decision to be made about the settlement.
Correct.
Did you
So
have the
there's-
information that he just brought
So-
to light,
Okay.
showing who made the connection, by who, and how the whole procedure went? This basically, we had our pipe, Elizabeth connected their stormwater pipe to ours.
Okay.
So they're the ones that took that burden,
So
and then later on, turned it into a sewer pipe.
two questions for you, right?
Okay.
So Roselle Park builds this sewer system,
No, stormwater.
stormwater system.
Okay.
It has to end somewhere in your story, right?
Into a
Where would it drain out to?
Into a natural ravine,
Okay, and that natural ravine is,
a waterway that's no longer there.
okay, it was a little brook, apparently, according to
It's
the
a ravine.
document, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be illegal right now.
Right now it would be, but at the time,
Correct.
it went in front of
So-
the judge,
so if
and the
that-
judge said it wasn't illegal.
So it didn't go in front of a judge, and the judge didn't say it was illegal. The judge ordered a culvert to be built, is what I understood.
Well, if you don't have the paperwork in front of you, how do you know?
I just listened to the gentleman speak.
Did you read it?
Did you read it?
There's a lot more to it
No, I
than that.
understand that. But to your other point about whether or not the documents were considered, right? There is a term of art that judges deal with, which is relevancy, right? So it not just because something exists, would a judge consider it as pertinent or relevant or important to the case. So just because that document exists, it may not be given the same weight or consideration. Elizabeth would argue that doesn't say what it pertains to say, and the judge
So,
would have to make that decision.
Last time, during the mayor and council meeting, you
Correct.
said no evidence exists
Of an agreement.
of what an agreement is, or
Correct.
anything, an
No, no.
official document.
That's not what I said.
All right.
What I said to you at the last meeting was, there's been no evidence of a meeting of the minds of a written agreement between the two parties.
Okay.
Right? So my understanding is even the researcher who did an excellent job, right, has not uncovered a written agreement between the city of Elizabeth and Roselle Park that sets forth the terms, the costs, the long-term maintenance, how much water can be,
So
right?
the reason that there is no agreement is because we put our stormwater drain there. It went in front of the judge. The judge said Elizabeth could not do anything about it. They could not plug it in.
They cannot
cannot
dam
do
it up.
anything. Correct.
Correct.
It went in front, so in order to rectify the situation, Elizabeth connected it to another pipe
Okay.
to rectify their flooding situation.
Understand.
So they took on that burden by doing that. And then later on, this is all happening because it's mixed stormwater with sewer water.
Okay. And a
which
lot,
Elizabeth,
and the,
wait, hold on. Elizabeth later on changed it to a sewer. So they're the ones that are causing the problem. Right or wrong?
wrong.
Not by what the information that Mr. Gura found out.
So a lot has changed. The population
But it
of
would
Roselle
still be
Park in
grand-
1910 was
It
how
would
many?
still be grandfathered in, number one.
No, it doesn't.
And
doesn't-
number two, they wouldn't be able, they might tell us, yes, you have to disconnect, but guess what? We wouldn't be paying the $4 million lawsuit settlement.
Not necessarily true. So if you had to disconnect, there is a cost being incurred by the residents of Elizabeth. I'm not here to defend the residents of Elizabeth, but they had an attorney for Elizabeth who sits there and says they are incurring cost to treat water that comes from Roselle Park.
Which was caused by Elizabeth.
It's not caused, it's caused by God when the rain falls. That's
No,
who
it's
causes.
caused by Elizabeth
It's
because
not-
it's mixed with sewer water, which Elizabeth did.
Again,
Number one. Number
there
two,
is-
if
No,
he didn't
stop,
have the
stop. Let me
information
finish.
to go in front of a judge,
Let me finish.
he didn't have the information in front of a judge, why are we settling? He didn't have any of the information.
There was,
That's legal malpractice.
it's not legal
Okay.
malpractice, sir.
Refresh to Elizabeth. Why are we doing that? We're giving them money.
Once again,
There's another gentleman walking up to speak, so I'm going to pay him the respect, okay? And when you come up, I'll give you the same respect.
once again,
I'm just trying so,
I want to reiterate, once a lawsuit is filed, right, whatever happened in 1978, it is all taken into consideration when a judge makes this judgment as to whether or not things have changed, as whether or not the population of Roselle Park has changed, as there's more stormwater flows. The case that they are making is that the situation has become untenable for the city of Elizabeth, and Roselle Park needs to do something about it. And a judge could take that under consideration, a judge could not. But once we go to lawsuit, it's all in their hands. And he could say, look, it is what it is in 1978. Now the DEP is charging the city of Elizabeth for this. The game has changed, and Roselle Park needs to pay their price. These are all the risks when you go to court. Go ahead, Chris.
So, thank you for having this meeting, and
Guys.
thank you always for being respectful with me, as I always try to be with you.
Yep.
So what I really would like to say is first, thank you for listening, I think, and trying to rectify what I think is a problem. But what seems obvious to me, and what I've thought from the beginning, is I think you are a victim of severely bad advice, both in legal advice, perhaps in, I don't know what it is. It seems like there's a tremendous amount of information which has come out very quickly. And you getting the advice to keep the meeting secret, getting the advice to not inform the public, this all seems like really bad advice. Now, you as a person, I don't really know you, but I think that you want to do a decent job. I think that you care about the community and you have deep roots here.
Yep.
Those are my feelings about you.
Yep.
But ultimately, what I would like to see is you putting the community first.
Yep.
And not always capitulating to the people next to you and asking them the right way.
Yep.
You perhaps should get advice from them and then make your own decisions.
Yeah.
And perhaps get new people to get advice from. Because the advice seems, at the very least, to be incredibly suspicious.
Yeah.
And it makes you look bad
Yeah.
because you're taking the advice.
Yeah.
So thank you once again.
Yeah, so just two things, Chris. So I appreciate that, and I do want to have the lawyers talk about the logistics of how this happened and why it happened in closed session. I'm not going to say in secret, but in closed session. I will say, just, I don't mean to laugh about it, but we did change lawyers in between, and both lawyers shared this view, right? So it is something, you know, I admit freely, Chris, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a JD, right? So we employ these folks. And, you know, I trust what they say, and I'll let Mike and Joe talk about some of the processes.
I just wanted to bring up another point of why is this ahead now, right? So a combined sewer system has multiple problems, right? When it rains, when there's increased water, there is discharges because the system can't handle it. And those discharges go into rivers and streams, and the state and the federal government has ordered, New Jersey in particular, where CSOs exist, Elizabeth being one of them, that they have to fix that, right? We, Roselle Park, are part of that system. So if you didn't disconnect and you didn't settle, you would still be in a position, and one of the things suggested was that if you stayed on the system, then you're going to have to pay a big portion of what they're going to have to pay to fix their system to comply. And the reason why I bring that up is they've had this system, as you've all pointed out, for a while, but they're now forced to do things because the rules and regulations related to stormwater continually change for the benefit of the residents. Right? So what it was proper to have prior to this culvert being built, it was purely acceptable to have an open riverbed accepting stormwater. But then that wasn't sufficient in 1914 and 1915, so they had to develop more and put a road system in and build a culvert, and systems continued to grow. The population in Roselle Park in 1910 is going to be less than it is now. So the amount of water, if such an agreement existed, and what you put into it is now further increased by a further built-out storm system. All those factors get weighed into a judge. He doesn't just look at documents from 1914 or 1923 and say, sorry, Elizabeth, you made a bad choice 100 years ago. He looks at the equity, right? The thing that is missed is we did not get pulled into a criminal court. We did not get pulled into the family court, the juvenile court, the municipal court, or the civil court. We got pulled into the chancery court. It is a totally different animal. right? The judge is much more powerful. There is no jury. They decide it. They decide it on a very quick timeline. Anyone involved in a lawsuit, don't care what it is, they are 4 years, 5 years, 6 years long to get to a jury trial. In Chancery, it's less than a year. From the time the lawsuit's filed, you don't have a lot of time. And the judge is empowered by the state of New Jersey to make decisions like this, to sit there and say, what is fair? It's the name of the court. It's an equity court. And fairness will be, we may not like it. We may not like it, but Elizabeth is being charged to treat Roselle Park stormwater. So that meter, whether you stayed on it, don't stay on it, you were going to pay for it. The amount was going to be left up to a judge. It does, but it doesn't control. You know, understand, but it's not a controlling point. Potentially, and probably not, though. It's not. What's really the more thing is the current. You do know, sir. You do know.
Well, Chris, but Chris, so here's the thing. Here's where you're not wrong, right? Had we gone to court, right, and had we gone to trial and said, look, we've got this piece of evidence.
Negotiations with more evidence, you would have been in a stronger position to negotiate. What's done is done.
Yeah, so agreed. But here's where I just want to. So just two things I want to hit on, right? Here, two things I want to hit on, right? So I want to go back to why I don't like the word secret, right? Because I don't think. I'll say this again. So this is where. Fair enough, but logically, right? If we felt that our best negotiating position was to talk about this in public, of course, I would love to avoid this last-minute surprise. Right, but Mike, so can we talk about why we talk about these things in closed session, right? I'm just hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Certainly, because we're in the middle of negotiations and you don't negotiate in public. If we had had the discussions in public about negotiating stance, then Elizabeth would know where the council and the mayor were.
You're not elected to represent me and my money. You're elected to represent me and my money.
And Mayor, the state law.
2 weeks before I went out of work for 2 months with $700.
I understand, Chris. We are obligated to listen to the advice of our lawyers, right? And in certain cases, especially more recently, they've gotten pretty aggressive about this. It's not out of the ordinary that like council people get fined personally, right, for not listening to the advice of lawyers, like.
Or for discussing what was discussed in closed session outside. Litigation is one of those things that state law allows you to discuss in executive session because you are discussing strategy, tactics, negotiation provisions.
But here's.
You were the one elected to protect me and my money.
Understood. And I can tell you, you might not agree with it, right? But the calculus that I made, right, and not just me, council made, right, was there's a ton of that we've discussed tonight, right? There's facts on Elizabeth's side, there's facts on our side. Had we gone to a judge, there's risks on both ends, right? There's the upside of maybe we would have had to pay nothing, right? There's the downside of maybe we had to pay $20 million, right? We made the most informed decision we could because, look, as George put on Facebook, right? I may not be the biggest ratepayer, but I'm also a taxpayer here, and I'm a ratepayer here, right? You know, we all own houses in Roselle Park. We all pay water bills, like we have skin in the game too. But I want to talk on a positive note once again. This is. So Mike and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Had we gone to court, the bare minimum, I believe the judge signals is we would have had to disconnect from the sewer system.
Absolutely.
Right? So let's put that aside for a second, right? We would have had to have disconnect, right? And I want Kevin to talk about why we chose that route. But putting that aside for a second, the thing that I think there's a lot of consternation about is the fees, right, and the back pay, right? Most of that is getting covered by the state now, right? So it's not fun that this has to get paid regardless, but the Roselle Park taxpayer will bear significantly less of that based on the recent developments, which is good. But I think it's fair to say, I think based on your guys' best guess, right? I don't think we would have got out unscathed completely in terms of payment in the rears.
Correct, Mayor. So even assuming there was an agreement, a written agreement that said you can dump into our system, signed in 1923, at that time there were no sewer processing fees being charged because the joint meeting didn't build their first sewer plant until 1934. So a judge in equity is going to look at that and say, okay, even if there was an agreement, but the agreement didn't include them paying your sewer treatment fees. That's not what the judge would have considered fair. And there are a couple of theories in the equity court. One is unjust enrichment. The court would consider that unjust enrichment. You're dumping into their system, they're paying for it. And there's another one, a Latin term called quantum meruit. They're providing a service for you, and they're entitled to be paid for it. So that's a type of thing that would happen in the equity court, even if there was a written agreement that says you can dump into here forever, which there is not.
So just real quick, before we go any further, and I'm happy to take other public commentary, Cindy, what are you saying? We should wipe something away? Okay, whatever. Can I want to have just Kevin touch on the logistics of why the water's flowing, why the separation is happening this way, right? Because I know, Kevin, there was some, actually council members too, who said, maybe there were some shorter routes, maybe there were some other routes we could have taken. Can you talk to us a little bit about why that route was selected and how it was the cheapest option?
Push harder.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mayor. So the route that was chosen, it was actually looked at, there's several routes looked at over the course of several years with different options as far as methods for construction. When we look at stormwater, we tend to choose underground pipe systems to keep the water underground out of sight. A couple different options that were initially looked at were overland flow. There's a couple options with pump stations. All that, costs a lot more money than we ended up coming with now, which was part of the agreement. In the initial part, our initial path for that agreement was taking a route all the way down Route 28, which is a state highway. As you maybe know, if you go into Elizabeth, you get closer to Orchard Avenue, there's a big hill.
Just real quick, Kevin, before we go into the multiple options through Elizabeth, why was that Elizabeth, so that's flowing into Elizabeth River now, correct?
Correct.
Why was that the closest one? Was that the easiest one to build to? What were some of the other options? Forget about the options going through Elizabeth. What were the other towns we could have gone through or other routes?
From a state permitting standpoint, there's really no other routes. Looking
Okay.
at the geography, the whole area and the whole county, the flow from the areas west of Galloping Hill and north of Route 28 all generally flow towards the Elizabeth River historically.
Got it.
So the state would look back historically and say, this is where the overland flow was going. It was piped. That's why you got to keep it
So
going.
this is new news for me, which is good context, right? Because we already have the Essex County joint sewer and Rawway Valley. There was no other potential. The state might not have permitted us for any of those options, or probably would not have permitted us
Yes.
based on the fact that it historically flows through Elizabeth.
Yeah, it would have been
Okay.
a very difficult
Got
process.
it. Okay. So keep going.
So we chose the route through Route 28 instead of the initial route, which had us going all the way to 28 to the Elizabeth River. There's a large hill there, so the costs of construction just to get through that part would be astronomical, which would drive the overall price and the price of the residents up, which would require actually tunneling through. There's actually a current sewer main there that just was tunneled through back in the 50s. We would have to basically do the same thing because the pipe would be about 40 to 50 feet below grade. So looking at a couple different scenarios, the route was chosen to go down Orchard and kind of mimics some of the route that the current the combined system goes through now. So we'll have a maintainer discharge point out to Elizabeth River, but the route that we chose basically allows for a system that is relatively shallow, which lowers the cost for construction, and runs on a gravity system. So the maintenance and future repairs of any systems of the storm system would be very minimal. So that's from an economical standpoint, and just from a logistics standpoint of construction, that was a route that was more favorable to the borough.
Just real quick, Chris. Just
Elizabeth handled their stormwater. Do they treat all of their stormwater? Is their entire city in a combined system?
I don't know their entire city, but their north
Part of it.
west portion of their city, which
Yeah.
we run through with our system, is combined. I believe a majority of Elizabeth always does have combined systems.
They are, well, so the EPA allows for, yeah, thanks. The EPA allows, so this is how this whole thing came up, right? So keep me honest here, Joe. So the EPA basically says, this system affects, what are the 150,000 people in Elizabeth, right? So they do a calculation based on flows for that 150,000 people. They got overage charges because the EPA does not count, nor will it count, our stormwater specifically, right? So basically, when they started getting those overage charges, and they tracked the overage charges coming from Roselle Park, that's when they said, Roselle Park, you need to pony up.
So when there's, to your point, when,
It's hugely unfair. That seems like they're filling up their quota with their stormwater,
no, so,
So,
have to pay the overtime.
so what happens in a combined system is when there's a strong storm and an excess of stormwater, the system can't handle it with the sewage. And then it discharges in breakpoints, right? So it'll illegally discharge, untreated, it'll illegally discharge into it. So the EPA has said you can no longer do that, or you have to fix that. And they put all these towns, and they're predominantly older municipalities, right? So large parts of Hudson County, Newark, Elizabeth have combined systems. So there's two ways to deal with it. You either separate it, or you minimize the stormwater coming into it. So one of the ways Elizabeth is looking at it and beneficial is to remove Roselle Park's stormwater, and then they would have less reported incidences where they discharge during storms.
just, fair enough, but just.
But understand, the regulations regarding draining into waterways have constantly changed.
But then we would never be on the hook.
No, but not necessarily, because your water contributes to the discharge. Again, it's not.
But Chris, just we're rehashing a bunch of other topics that we already touched on. But just to answer your other question, so they do have a massive issue, and they have a $80 million separation project of their own. Just as an FYI. Cindy, I think you were next. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have two different things.
Sure.
The first one, as lawyers, I'm not a lawyer, so would you say that details are important?
Relevant.
In law, in
relevant details.
So we keep talking about this since the beginning today. Keep talking, I can't remember the word you used, leach on their system or whatever the word that you used, as far as we're dumping into their system. I would think a relevant detail would be the fact that we did not, illegally hook up to their system. They did that to themselves. They hooked up to our system years ago. Is that not a relevant detail that you would think a judge would take into account?
No.
No. Why?
As we stated earlier, when the connection was made, there were no charges.
Right.
When the connection was made, there was no DEP. When the connection was made, there were no rules promulgated in 2015.
Which is why we didn't complain about them doing
Where
it.
Elizabeth is directed by the DEP, and to fix this problem, to have no more than 4 discharges into the river, and that they are directed to disconnect other sources that are dumping into their system. So
Right.
no,
Which I don't disagree with you. I mean, if you look at it, if our water is going into their water and they're getting charged, that's one thing. It's the back fines that I think is the bigger issue.
And they're the things everybody's complaining about, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
and I
what's-
think that is a huge detail.
what I-
Because we're saying, oh, well, we did this to them and it's our, no, they did it to themselves. And at no point did they say, oh, this might hit us later. They did it. And why wouldn't a judge take that into account when thinking about it?
well, first, they're only going back a certain number of years, because they only put a meter in the pit. And
Well, if they went back far enough, we were part of Elizabeth. Little history lesson. We were Elizabeth. Then we became Union, and we only became Roselle Park in 1901.
Oh, think of it this
so
way.
if 1910,
10
this
year-
occurred.
10 years ago, they put a meter in the system so they could measure, and they've been after the borough for 10 years to fix the problem and to pay them. And this isn't a solution that this administration rushed into. Prior administration, and I may butcher the last name, Mayor Hokinson and his council commissioned a study with their engineer at the time in 2017 to come up with how do we disconnect solutions as well. And as the mayor indicated, they were all too expensive, and our hand hadn't been forced by a lawsuit at that time. So this isn't something that was rushed into. It's been in the works and being discussed in town for at least 10 years.
But just real quick, Cindy, because I want to hammer this home, and it's not an answer that anybody likes. It's not an answer that I like, right? There's a word, Joe or Mike, you told me, but there's a term, basically when they put in the meter, legally, they have claim to the fees, right? Because in a judge's eye, so you're right? Like, I'm going to play judge here, right? And this is what would have happened had we gone actually through with the lawsuit, right? You're right. Could we have presented the case that this happened in 1978, this happened in 1981, we were established in 1904, whatever, right? But what also goes into a judge's decision, right, is shit changes, right?
Yeah.
So, and what changed, which really
We also kept saying, I mean, you even said it.
Can I just finish real quick, Cindy? Yeah.
Can I just
Yeah,
say
sure.
one thing,
Yeah,
since
yeah,
you were,
yeah.
you said we didn't have any of these documents. We only had newspaper clippings. That's not true.
But just let me finish.
Okay.
This is why it's not, I don't want to say why it's not important, but not, it's relevant is the correct term, is because legally, right, and there's Jesus, why is the word escaping me? There's example cases of this happening, right? Precedent, thank you. Legal precedent that basically says, Elizabeth, when they put in the meter in 1913, said, whatever else we talked about before, this has changed and this became problematic for it. Roselle Park, in good faith, you need to communicate with us and come up with an agreement, right? So that's why we felt comfortable, and a reasonable agreement was the $4 million versus $23 million, because if you backtrack to that 2013 date, that's kind of the back pay there. Because our best guess was a judge would say, yeah, you know what, you're right. There was a bunch of stuff that happened before, but Elizabeth put this on your radar at Roselle Park in 2013 and said, you need to fix this, and you kicked the can down the road. So that's kind of where, in our best guess, a judge would say, whatever else happened was not totally irrelevant, but good background story. Elizabeth put this on your radar and said, this is your problem, Roselle Park, and you kicked the can down the road, you owe something.
Okay. Now,
Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I don't really understand
we don't have to
sewer
love it,
water,
but-
so
but do you
I don't
understand-
understand why they couldn't have just disconnected themselves since they hooked themselves up. Unhook yourself then, but that's
then
neither
if-
here nor there.
but the
I don't
problem-
understand sewer,
So
so.
the problem with that solution is, then you would still be stuck building the system that he's talked about to where it goes.
Right, but
And
that's
in
a
the-
separate charge than the
correct,
$4 million.
But in the interim, where does the water go then?
Well, in our
And-
basements like it's been for the past few years, so what's
Well,
the difference?
So side note,
But there's a benefit, I know, you're going to get there. But to the point is, so in that interim,
Mm-hmm.
right, we will pay for using their system. And in essence, we just described the settlement,
Right,
which was the
Right.
back pay.
okay.
which is, we're not talking about the stuff before. We're saying, okay, you want us off your system. Legally, you can't just close it down because our stormwater has to go somewhere. So we're going to get off. And they're going to say, well, you got to use our system while you're trying to get off, so you got to pay us.
Okay.
That's the settlement. Sounds different when we talk about it that way.
But the one bonus to your point is, it is a
gonna
silver
nod my
lining.
head.
It is a legitimate silver lining in all this, right? There is, when we get flash floods and storms, it is a problem on that side of town. And part of the problem is because we have bigger pipes in Roselle Park than what goes into Elizabeth, right? So now we're going to have continuous, 8-inch pipes? What is it?
Probably be a 42-inch pipe.
Yeah.
but it'll be-
Well, way off. 42-inch pipes, right? So for those of us that know, it's lovingly called Lake Sherman, right? A lot of that should be alleviated post this issue. So
I have a second part to the question, not related to this.
sure,
hookup.
sure.
Where did the amount to increase come from? Because just trying to do the math, and I just can't grasp where it's coming from. I just kind of Googled a little bit. We have about 5,000 homes.
Yep.
Give or take.
Yep.
If you divide the $4 million by 11 years, it's like $368,000 a year. You divide that by 5,000 homes, it should be an increase of like $72 a year. Why did our sewer bill double? On average, maybe an extra $400 or $500 per household. Over the course of 11 years comes to about $23 million.
Yes. So I'll take a crack at some of that, the missing pieces, right? So you're right, there's 11-year horizon in the back pay, but we also do we came up with a rate for the flows, right? So that meter's there. So just like we pay Essex County or whatever else, our flows, we're gonna pay something to Elizabeth. So that's the piece also that we have to consider. What else is in there, Ken? Also, just it is also not as cut and dry of take the bill divided by 5,000 houses, right? As an example, right, there's...
Plus the businesses, I didn't even
Sure,
count
and
those,
and apartment complexes, right? Not even the ones that you guys
That was
hate me
just the
for, the
homes.
ones that have been here since
So it
the
should be less than
1960s, you know?
$72.
Yeah.
When the budget was prepared and done, it was all guesstimate still because the lawsuit was not settled. So originally, there was talks that it was going to be roughly $4 million, but only paid over 8 years, so that would be $500,000 alone just for the back pay.
Right.
And it was estimated about $300,000 going forward. So we had a budget for the city of Elizabeth payment, $800,000 in this.
Okay,
The sewer is not based on household, it's based on water consumption.
right.
And that's how the rate was struck.
Okay.
With the other increases in the other sewage authorities, and we also had other payments to make to the joint meeting for capital projects that they were undertaking.
Okay. The reason I was asking was because I was wondering, when I multiplied it out, it did come to about 23 million, not including the businesses, the apartment complex,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yep.
We're only paying them 4, and they initially asked for 23. Is that where we came up with the initial doubling
So once
to
again,
cover the 23?
good news is we did this year's rates off an estimate, right? We'll have actual numbers to project for this year. So forget about state aid. It would have come down next year one way or the other. Now that we have this state aid, it's going to come down significantly, right? Definitely next year. We're hoping this year, right? Should everything work out. So we should be back to a more normal place next year in terms of sewer bills. And the last piece I want to say is, like, not that there's any, like solace in this, like a big bill sucks, right? A big bill sucks. But we are not allowed to raise the rates of the sewer bill unless we have some cost, right? So people think like New Jersey has all these slush funds. We don't have them on a local level, right? Legally, by the auditors, your rates have stayed the same for the last 12 years, right? So again, like, I'm not saying like, hey, we gave you 12 years of no increase, but like those things do catch up when you can't do the incremental increases year over year. Does that make sense?
I mean, it does make sense.
Yeah.
For you or I, mine doubled $400. For you or I, that might not be,
Yeah.
that sucks,
Yep.
but
It's
it's
doable.
not going to make or break my life.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people in Roselle Park. There's plenty of senior citizens that have only pensions, only Social Security. $800 is a big deal.
No
They
disagreements there.
might not be eating just to save up to save for their sewer bill.
No disagreements there.
So are you going to say that we will not have another bill due in November?
So I cannot say that tonight. We are working furiously to figure out just how the money is getting to us from the state of New Jersey. The goal is to not have anybody pay for the second sewer bill, right? So, sorry? If you already paid for it, we're going to have a mechanism. So let's just assume for a second, best case scenario, you only have one sewer bill this year that you already paid, right? We think the people who have prepaid are probably in like the 40 to 50 range, right? The hope is, Ken's sweating right now because none of this is fully baked. But the hope is, assuming that we can cut out that second payment, if you paid, you can either come and get a check back for what you paid, or you can credit it to next year's sewer bill. That's the hope, right? Nothing's final yet, but we're working on it. And things are, I'm going to keep yelling at Ken and Andrew until they make it work, so.
I just hope that you're more transparent, more communication, especially for the people that this is literally do or die.
No
$400 in a couple, mine was significantly cheaper than some people's, but
No disagreement here. And can I say also something we've learned in the process, which RJ's here. RJ's a perfect example. Sorry to call you out.
Know
But,
who RJ is.
but we, hi, RJ Katurka.
Hello.
So I think one thing that we've learned through this is also other towns. I mean, look, our sewer rate's been pretty low in the past, so it hasn't been painful. But other towns also, we judge it off 12 months of consumption from water, right? So if you have a pool, if you water your grass, things that don't impact the sewer, you're still paying off of that. We're going to change that, I think the next meeting actually, such that we will base it off of we doing 1 month or winter months, basically?
It's going to be the last 3 months of the year.
Last 3 months of the year, which is a more accurate reading of just the people who use the shower, use the water, use the dishwasher. So if you water your lawn or if you have a pool, those uses of water don't impact the sewer system,
They're not
and
going
you
in.
shouldn't get dinged for that. So it is something we are going to address going forward. Oh, okay, thank you. All right, feels good. You can boo me after, just equal it out, it's fine. Yeah, did you want to come up to the mic? You come up all the time. Let Mr. Schreiber go. Yeah.
You just said it wouldn't affect it if you water your lawn and use the pool and everything, but everything's based on water consumption, no?
Yeah, so what we're saying is, historically, basically, this is how you got a sewer bill before, right? Is let's just say my water bill is about $30 a month, right? So we take those rates from American Water, we get those readouts, and then we calculate our sewer rate based off that for 12 months of the year. What we're saying is, we're just going to take that calculation and prorate it for the winter months.
Right.
This way, it's an accurate read of the shower use,
We're going to take October,
Thank
November,
you.
December, and multiply it by 4. And we would avoid the high-frequency use months of, June, July, August.
Right.
Right?
makes sense.
So for the water that predominantly does not go into the system, right?
Right.
Unless you drain your pool or whatever, and whatever.
Don't
But
have a pool,
you-
so I don't have to worry
Well,
about
or irrigation, and it goes into the ground, right? You avoid that on a principled stance, and it's just.
But
what-
you're still using the water your water bill to base your sewer
Yes.
correct.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
numbers on.
Correct.
But we're trying to change it so it's only during those months where you're probably not using it for outdoor activities. Right, so basically what we're saying is,
What's actually going into the sewer
Right.
is what you're going to get charged for more so than what goes into your grass or what
we're
goes
dealing
into
with
your pool.
ringers here, we got American Water employees, so.
So,
X.
yeah, so typically your water usage in January, 100% of that water usage goes down the drain,
Right.
Ballpark.
right? Because you're not watering your plants, right? Where in August or July,
Right.
100% of your water usage doesn't all go down the drain, because you might have washed your sidewalk.
But it's still going through that meter.
But we're not looking at it to calculate the sewer rate at that point in time. What we're saying is, what is your typical usage? So in January, because you're not watering your lawn, you might only use 100 gallons. But in August, because you do water your lawn, you use 130.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So you would get dinged for that extra 30 gallons
Mhm.
and pay an extra 30 gallons worth of sewage.
Right.
What we're doing is October, November, December, taking that when you're not watering your lawn and saying, that's your average use. We're going to multiply it by 4, and that's the bill.
But to your question, we use water bill as a proxy, right? We don't have sewer meters in all the houses. I think that's relatively standard for municipalities. Is that correct, Andrew and Ken?
Yes.
Yeah.
Some towns do it differently, but a lot of municipalities based on water consumption, because it's predominantly what goes down the drain, right? Roselle Park for, I'll say decades, has based off of 12 months of usage. Because of this issue, to the mayor's point, what's come out of it is, it really isn't, it's not fair, right? The municipality's gonna, reconcile the fact that it's really not fair, because a lot of people in town have pools, they have irrigation systems, they water their lawn, they take care of their property, and those are things you shouldn't be penalized for.
Right.
Right? And it shouldn't come in the form of a bill. So let's use it based off of what actually goes down the drain and impacts the system, as opposed to just keeping your property nice, right? And so that's the change that will be made going forward.
On the same page?
Very good.
On the same page now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it was a good explanation.
The question I had was regarding the cost to connect our own line to the river. Now, I understood initially in the agreement, this is something like $20 million?
Yeah, so it's not, it's
So,
okay.
so the question then becomes is, Obviously, that would be a capital kind of improvement over a long period of time, right?
Correct.
And could you just kind of describe the timeline in which that would likely occur?
Yeah, so from a funding perspective, it's going to hit different than the fees, right? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, both Kevin and Ken, the infrastructure bank is a thing in New Jersey that is basically built for these mega projects, right? And based on our size of the town, I mean, these payments can be spread out over 50 to 100 years, right? So it'll really be hopefully de minimis on the year-to-year basis, right? They're pretty extended timeframes. Is that fair to say?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Ken may be able to better explain, but yeah, but it's a longer period of payments, and they're usually very low interest, if any.
And a lot of
Interest, that's what I was wondering, because
Yeah.
I'm sure Ken is always concerned about
and just real
the
quick,
cost of interest payments on bonds and everything
based on the
else.
type of town we are and the size of town we are, a lot of times, part of like those interests can be forgivable, right? So
Is there a date, though, that when this needs to be accomplished?
when does it need to be?
January 1st, 2029.
29.
So-
It
so-
needs to be completed.
It needs to be completed. We need to be disconnected from the City of Elizabeth system by January 1st, 2029. That date is solid, but also not, right? It is solid in the sense that the settlement agreement with the City of Elizabeth stipulates that as the deadline. Now, if we will need state permitting to go under the highway, we need state permitting with DEP. If any of those things unduly delay the project, there are mechanisms to have a reasonable extension to that period of time, right? Where there's an iterative process between Roselle Park and Elizabeth to get this project done. The idea is to disconnect in a timely manner. And it's also, having that deadline incentivizes us, because between now and that time, we're going to pay quarterly payments to Elizabeth for that metered usage. So look, if we could get done by the end of this year, I'd love to get done by the end of this year, because it means nobody in this room will be paying quarterly
I'm
to
going to go start
Elizabeth,
digging right now.
right? But logistically, the size of this project, you say $20 million. The reality is the project will go out to bid, right? There will be a bidding, there's an estimated process, right, depending on the finalization of the project and the scope. The bids will dictate, and the budget will dictate, and the infrastructure bank will dictate what the final cost is, but it will be tens of millions.
Right. Now, the $3 million that we just got, that was from like the state of New Jersey kind of general fund sort of thing?
Correct, and
Okay.
it's specifically for operating, so not for capital.
So it raises the question, like, let's take the example of EPA and Superfund sites and cleanup for that kind of thing.
Yes.
Is there anything, Elizabeth isn't the only city involved with this kind of joint sewer. I mean, I think there are 8 or 9 cities in New Jersey.
more than
and
that.
probably similar kinds of legislation or litigation that's been initiated through various, towns because of these kinds of things. So it seems to cry out for a solution. Given that they've made the regulations, shouldn't they be liable in some kind of grandfathering of the cost of these things?
So as recently as this week, between Kevin's office and the administration, we've been having conversations about we keep on saying the infrastructure bank because they fund large projects like this for municipalities. There's a specific cutout for their CSO program. And predominantly, they're used by cities like Elizabeth or Jersey City or Bayonne or Newark, right, that have these old systems in their town. Now, the difference is we don't have the system in our town, but we're using it. We've been using it, right? For better or worse, however you get there, we've been using the system. There's no doubt about it, right? So something we're advocating for, and our bond counsel's not here, but between the grants group that we're using at our engineering firm and our bond counsel, we're advocating for this to be considered a CSO project. Because of the size and scope of those projects, because they're kind of nobody's fault projects, the financing is much more attractive for municipalities. They're very low interest. They're over an extended period of time. You have a longer payback time. Ultimately, what you pay is closer to just what the project costs as opposed to who's making money on it, right? Who is the lender that's making money on it. So there is a carve out, and we're trying to advocate to fold this in as a CSO project, combined sewer outflow project, as opposed to just a general capital project that's large and we're financing through the iBank.
And we'll also advocate for, just on top of that, right? So just like we advocated for, I didn't want to say anything, right, until it was done, because I didn't want to promise we were going to get operating money and then come up with a donut, right? So I was I was secretive on that one, but because I didn't want to, get everybody disappointed if I came up empty. We will also just advocate the state for direct funds for this next year.
Right.
So do I think we're going to get $20 million directly from the state? No, but is it feasible that we get a quarter to half of it paid just directly to the state, like they helped us out with the fee? Yeah, it's feasible.
Yeah, thinking at the various levels of government, I mean, obviously, there's $1 trillion infrastructure bill at the federal level.
Yep.
Is there opportunities there?
So we're gonna explore all grants. Yeah, they have a grant team that's on it, and then we have. Look, the goal is to try and get as much in grants as we can do, and whatever we can't fund with grants or state aid, then we'll have to send to the iBank and
Right.
put on a credit card, basically.
And given that this is an inter-county issue, has Union County any accessibility to any of the funds, or maybe even wants to be involved from the standpoint it involves municipalities within the county?
I would say so. Look, I think sewer is something they stay away from, right? I think were we in a financial need for it, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they would help, guarantee credit for it. They've done it with other towns.
Right.
But I think that would be the limit of it. I could always ask, right? But I can ask.
So bottom line, you'll explore at every level of the government?
Correct, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No. Johnny, I know you're coming back up, but does anybody else who hasn't spoken yet want to come up before? Go ahead. Oh, yeah, come on, RJ. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that adjustment that you're going to make. That's
Yeah.
going to make a huge difference. I, for one, take great care and pride in my.
Your lawn's beautiful.
Thank you. So, and that's bottom line. It's the right thing to do.
Yep.
So I just want to get off my chest just a couple things. So first, some good things. One is we got the $3 million from the states, outstanding.
Yep.
But I think what bothered me and probably what bothered many residents was the fact that a lot of this was happening behind closed doors.
Yep.
And a lot of statements were made as a result of those closed doors discussions. Statements like there was a 100-year-old handshake deal that occurred, which may not necessarily be true. We don't know that. What we do know is that we are now connected to Elizabeth's combined system. We know that. That's a fact.
Yep.
We have documentation that could support that we didn't connect to them, they connected to us, albeit that it might not be admissible in any sort of court, or a judge may not accept any of that.
Yep.
But I think what pissed a lot of people off was the fact that we were led on to believe over the last several months that this was something caused by Roselle Park. And I think we know now, and albeit it might be water under the bridge, no pun intended, this was at no fault to us. But it was portrayed and communicated that we connected, and you even said it tonight, that we connected to them. We did not connect to them. They connected to us, and they asked us to alleviate their flooding problems. So I think, not that I hope we have it next time, but I hope, but I hope that when statements are made to the public as important as we're going to have to pay $4 million to the city of Elizabeth, that we're just a little bit more careful in how we portray those. That's
Yeah.
all. So.
No, so RJ, fantastic, and I appreciate your commentary. A couple things I just want to respond to. So first off, on a human level, I've been getting beat up over this for the last 3 months, right? And I'm not saying woe is Joe, but trust me, I've gotten beat up over a lot of crap. But if I could have, if we thought it was in the best interest from our negotiating perspective to tell everybody and warn everybody, hey guys, it's going up. People may not like me or what I do here, but I'm not a dummy, right? Of course I'd rather people go through the process and everybody feel like they're part of it, right? You guys could agree with it or disagree with it. Our lawyers felt like we had a better negotiating hand to play by, doing this in closed session. And I feel like that's also a norm when there's a lawsuit, right? We've had other lawsuits and done that in those lawsuits. What was the other thing I was going to say? The other thing I also want to say is assume for a second, right, they connected to us, right? Water flows and just there's no other way that it would have gone, right? Water flows to Elizabeth, right? So the water is there, right? So I don't think it's as black and white as saying it's Elizabeth's fault or Roselle Park's fault, right? The runoff from Roselle Park exists, and the only way that it would not exist going towards Elizabeth is if we put in some pump and started jet streaming it up to wherever, Rawway, right? Like, so the water is there, right? So I don't think it's, everybody likes to have these clean black and white. It was Elizabeth's fault or it was Roselle Park's fault. I think that, first off, nobody got murdered here, right? So I'm not pointing fingers, but I think it's a lot more gray than just saying, Elizabeth made this hookup or Roselle Park made this hookup, because like, whoever made the hookup, like Roselle Park's water's got to go somewhere, is all I have to say on the matter. So go ahead, Johnny. Yeah.
3 or 4 quick things. I know you guys had just mentioned that you were going to do away with the water usage in the summer.
Yeah.
Obviously, your sewer bill is a certain dollar amount, say $10 million, right?
Yep.
You're going to do away with your high water usage months, and you're going to base it off the winter months.
Yep.
So all them high water usage months, where's that money get made up? The sewer rates are going to have to increase to make up for those high water usage months.
Yeah, you're framing it incorrectly. So the rate is the rate.
The rate is the rate.
Some people might have to proportionally pay more.
Right, because for lack of usage of other people. So other people
Correct.
are going to pay more.
Yeah, so you're 100% right.
So your $10 million, say your $10 million pot, still has to be made up.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're taking away the high dollar usage months,
Yep.
people will wind up paying more.
Not everyone.
Not everybody. It's going to be.
But people will wind up paying more.
But it's more
Let me get this one.
It definitely is more equitable.
Yeah, more
But,
equitable.
Yes, I agree
Correct.
with you there.
So
but
then-
there are people that will be paying more.
We don't disagree with you, but-
The people who aren't using more in the summer will actually be paying more.
But you agree it's more equitable. It's
I
more,
absolutely
it's fair.
I agree.
It's a fairer
100%
system.
agree. Yeah, definitely 100%
It's fairer than the
system.
current system.
Correct, but I'm
So it's
letting
better.
people know that some people's water bills
Yes,
or sewer bills will be
yes.
going up, even though
And some
they're
would
doing
be-
away
and
with the summer.
some-
So right, so
And
let
some
me,
people
Joe,
would go down.
Joe,
Yes.
yeah. So
Yes.
what's going to happen? I can tell you with assurance, the rate per gallon is going to go down next year, right?
Okay.
Probably very drastically, based on the.
Well, it's per 100 cubic feet.
Let me finish, right? But what your point is, if you are a user who, like me, I don't water my lawn, I don't have a pool.
Right.
So proportionally, my bill's actually going to go up.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
100%
So
right.
I'm just letting people know that everybody's bills will not go down because of that.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
But the rate could.
The
and
rate,
will.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
The rate's going to stay. I don't
Well,
think it'll go down.
it depends on, right, and something I was going to say before, the way the rate is struck is cost divided by consumption.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
So if the town's consumption goes up, right, regardless of how you calculate
I mean,
it,
it'd
right,
probably
like
go
say-
down because you're not counting the summer months.
Well, look, here's I'll give you just a for instance, right? Like Dowlings is now open on Chestnut Street, right? They're using water right now.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't using water last year. So their consumption, they're going to pay more next year, regardless of what,
yeah.
if the rate was $1 is my
Right.
point, right? They're going to pay more, which means somebody else, if everyone else's consumption stays the same,
Go down.
it'll go down, right? So there's somewhat unknowns there. There's also variables with what the costs are, right? There was a capital payment we had to pay for the 100-year joint meeting project, right? That won't be in play next year. We have the $3 million, we're trying to figure that out. So to your point, yes.
Right.
This is the move of calculating the bill differently
Yeah.
is not so much as to say we're going to make everybody's bills go down. It's to say, what's the fair way to do it?
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I agree with you there.
But yeah, your point taken. And the other thing that also is going to probably change in between too is like, so pro rata, bringing up the apartment buildings too, you would imagine they're actually going to pay a larger share because all their water is, they don't have any lawns, right? And only Romorowski has a pool, so, and Meridia and Romorowski are coming online. So I don't know. We don't know what it's going to be, but we do think this is the fair way to do it.
It definitely is more fair.
And
yes, I
and
agree
the
with you
rate
there.
will go down.
Right.
Right. Cool.
So, and then back to the sewers.
Yeah.
So 1930, we put in a new sewer for, I'm talking sanitary now, not storm sewer.
Okay.
1930, we put a sanitary sewer into the interceptor going down Westfield Avenue.
Mhm.
Elizabeth allowed us to do that. There's documentation for it.
Yep.
If you look at the Elizabeth maps, there are overflows from Elizabeth sewers into ours.
Yep.
Are we going to start billing them for their sewage that jumps into ours now?
I couldn't even,
I mean, they're billing us for stuff
me,
that goes into theirs. Are we going to start?
I I couldn't speak to that. If we're talking about a sanitary issue, because it all gets treated at the
It all
joint
has to
meeting
get treated,
plant.
right? But we're getting their sanitary now getting treated through our pipes.
So the difference is,
It all goes into the same place and the overflow still happens.
I'm going to be very honest with you. I can't, in an educated
Okay.
way,
Right.
answer that question right now. What I can say is, in the joint meeting of Essex and Union County, which back, I think, was the Maple South Orange Sewer Company when it was first founded in 24 or whatever.
They're municipalities or
So
something.
Elizabeth, who's the biggest user by far of that system, of the joint meeting system that's treated, is actually not a voting member of the joint meeting.
Because it's located in Elizabeth.
Because it's located in Elizabeth, and because they have all these nuanced pieces,
Right.
and they pay a giant sum of money that's almost equivalent to the rest of the members. So to say that they're, how that all works, I can't tell you right now. I mean, I can ask the question
Right,
and
and
get
there's-
educated on it, but I'm not going to be able to quote
Right,
it for
and I
you
know
right
there's
now.
also our original sewer that goes down Park Avenue. It's a 12-inch clay pipe. That is our sanitary sewer, the original one before the new one was put in.
There's multiple egresses.
There are
from-
laterals that feed from Elizabeth Streets into our sewer, if it still is in fact our sewer.
But again, in terms of the,
Right.
our assessment from the joint meeting is somewhere around 3% of the total.
So
of
that
the total
doesn't change
bill.
no matter whose water goes through it.
The only way it would change is if, I guess, somebody else joined, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it's set by statute. My point is the city of Elizabeth pays a sum that is some agreed upon amount. I couldn't tell you how it
Right.
gets there. I'm imagining, and I'm assuming, so you know what happens, but I'm imagining that there was a calculation done by the joint meeting when all the members came together that Roselle Park is 3.27%, or whatever the numbers are, right? Newark is this much, and Elizabeth is 53%.
Because they make everything Fakakta.
By virtue of where they're located in proximity
Right.
to the treatment center.
But it's
You know what I mean? Like, their sewage is, like, why aren't we going back at them?
Look,
and saying, hey,
Johnny, there's nobody who'd rather go tit for tat like you're proposing. I think it's something that we'll discuss, and if it's a real thing, then we'll explore that.
Also, the county, back in the 20s, 25 actually,
Yeah.
put in storm sewers along Galloping Hill Road. They flow into that same combined sewer that ours does. Why were they not litigated in a lawsuit as well?
So where's
Why
the?
just us?
Why does the county have law? Why does the county have sewers?
I know nothing about this. so.
There's two pipes, there's a 15 and a 12. One that comes from Fernwood Road, maybe Westfield Ave, all the way to Park Ave.
Yeah.
And the other one comes from McGee to Park Ave,
Yep.
all down a county road.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, look.
Stormwater that comes out of there too, that also infiltrates. Why are we the only ones that are getting dope?
I mean, I guess there's a lot. Of,
I mean, what
there's
would
a
be
lot
a-
I've learned in the
what
last
would be-
6
what
years.
would be a gr- what would be a-
Wherever stormwater system is,
I mean,
probably.
but
You know,
if
I
our
mean, like,
stormwater's getting built, why isn't the county's stormwater?
Look,
on-
I
know what I mean?
couldn't even tell you. Maybe there is an agreement between the County of Union and Elizabeth. I'm not either of them.
we were here. We were prepared to talk about the
Right, I'm
issue
just
at
saying
hand.
that there's other issues that all are encompassed in this.
Johnny, you got. You'll get an answer from one of the two
Okay,
of us
that's fine.
after.
Whenever.
You got. Yeah, it'll
Thank you.
happen.
That's all.
Okay. That was fun. Anybody else? All right. So good news. We got a ton of money from the state. Your bill's going to go down. I know this sucks. We're working on it. Cool?
Quick question.
Go ahead.
$3 million, is that going to affect our operating money that we would get in 2025?
So yes, so once again, we have to plan out how, so there's, George, real quick, so we have to figure out if we have to pay it all this year, right? So there's a world where the state of New Jersey says, you get $3 million and you got to use it all this year, in which case we would prepay Elizabeth, right? Or we could spread it out and pay them over a couple of years. So yes, it'll affect our operating budget in 2025.
So we're not going to get any additional money?
No. So his question was, is it going to impact any other sources of aid? No.
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 Operating aid?
No.
No.
Okay, so this is strictly sewer?
It strictly
Yeah.
comes from the property tax relief fund from the state. It's a whole different fund.
Yeah.
It will not impact our state aid. It will not impact our municipal aid for roads. It is a completely
So it
different
doesn't
fund.
take from anything if that's
If we
your
didn't
question.
ask for it, we wouldn't get it.
No.
All right.
Mr. Dirkle?
You had mentioned that check.
Yep.
If we had paid the second portion of the store bill, I paid the whole thing.
Yes, sir.
At some point, we'll get some kind of notification for what do we bring with us from here?
So, do you want me to-
So Andrew and Ken are hating all this because we haven't figured out. We just found out about the money. Yeah, but let's assume, Mr. Urkel, so let's assume we decide that we can forego the second payment for this year, right? Which is the plan and the hope. If you have, the plan is, if you have paid, you can come to, for anybody who's watching this in the future, this is not final yet. We'll come up with a communication. But the plan is, if you've already paid, you can come to the CFO's office and ask for a refund or potentially use it as a credit for next year. Could change, but that's the plan.
Just for the record, you're not going to get a refund instantly if coming to the CFO's office. It has to go through the process. You'll have to complete a W-9,
Yeah.
a purchase order will have to be cut, a resolution. So,
Yeah, but,
Right.
but we have to, like, when we got to do a property tax rebate, mayor and council has to vote on it, right? So,
Check quicker than we give it back.
when we figure out how it can be used, and if we can use it that way, the people who have paid November's bill will be contacted and asked if you want to leave it as a credit for next year or how to fill out the process to get a refund.
we do, yeah, we do. So, I mean, I think we're going through the permitting process and stuff now.
Yeah, so it's as you can imagine, going down a state highway, which already has existing utilities in it, it's a very complicated process. So we are in the very preliminary stages of doing the due diligence. We are going to be surveying the whole roadway, which is complicated in itself, just being able to have men out there surveying it and taking measurements and all that stuff. So that whole process is going to get done now. We'll start the design. We'll get to a point where we're going to. Yeah, no, we don't have a project yet.
We have a route.
We have a general route which goes.
Yeah. No, so I would imagine we'll probably go out to bid for the project some point 2025, early 20.
Correct. Well, right, so.
They're making it.
Kevin, why don't you do me a favor, why don't you do, not me a favor, but do the public a favor and just kind of get, what are the milestones of the project?
Sure, and within 18 months from when the agreement was signed, we need to have plans that are ready pretty much for construction and submitting for permits. So that will take us towards the end of 2015. At that point, we will have already had conversations with all the agencies having jurisdiction over the project, the DOT, the county, the DEP, the Army Corps of Engineers. So the plan is to have already plans submitted to them so that within that 18-month period, we are on our way to get approvals with those agencies. How long it takes to get approvals is a little bit of an unknown. The state can take anywhere from 6 months to 18 months or even longer to review and approve something of this magnitude. They may approve it within 6 months. So I'm not sure that period is a little bit of an unknown, but the process now is to make sure that they're all on board with what we're designing and what the overall goal is. And as Andrew said earlier on, the overall timeline for the project is to have it built by January 2029. So I would anticipate construction.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One last thing. We all know that the Elizabeth River floods. Are we going to be liable for putting all this additional water into the river?
That's part of the design and permit process. The state's going to require that there's no additional flow to that point, so.
There will be additional flow from water that's known in there, right?
Not necessarily, because it all goes to a certain drainage area. They look at a point even from where the treatment plant discharges to, it all goes downstream to a certain point.
We're discharging into the Elizabeth River right around Western Avenue, I would assume, right? 28 Western Avenue.
It's just north, it's just north of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we know that
Yeah, there's-
sections of the Elizabeth River between there and the Arthur Hill, flood parts of Elizabeth.
So there's multiple discharge points.
So hold on. I understand where he's going. I just
I just want to know if we're going to be liable
Right.
for something like 100 years in the future.
Understood.
Elizabeth floods, are we going to
So I understand exactly where you're going, and to what Kevin was just saying, right? So all of these plans need to go to the DEP, who would be the enforcing agency for that flooding, right? Just hold on, please. Okay, so just to resume what I was saying. So DEP has to approve the plans, right, for us dumping water into at a certain point, right? If there is a flood, if Elizabeth tries to come after Roselle Park saying, you flooded this part, we go back and say, this project was approved by DEP
And Elizabeth.
and the Army Corps of Engineers.
you all do have to approve this?
That's the reason why to say when it goes out to bid is at least 18 months from now, because we're awaiting the approvals of those agencies that will give their sign off and say, this is a good project in our eyes based off the regulatory issues that we look for in terms of flooding and engineering and all of the other things that I'm completely dumb to. But to your point, we'll have that, can't stop somebody from suing us, but we'll have that protection, right, to say this was a project approved by all of these regulatory agencies.
And agreed upon by the city of Elizabeth personally, right? So this isn't even just, we decide, the Army Corps and DP, Elizabeth is signing on the dotted line here.
Result of a court order.
Correct, yeah. So, cool. Have a good night. Take it easy, everybody. Enjoy your summer. Come to the Mayor and Council meeting next week.